Hello, my lovely listeners, and welcome to my podcast, We Share, We Grow. I'm your host and holistic coach, Aoife Rafter. If you want to be empowered to take action in your self-development journey, then you are in the right place. We Share, We Grow will bring you closer to reaching your full potential through sharing and growing from the life-changing advice of my favourite health and wellness experts. I believe that we grow through what we go through, and together we can become abundant in all aspects of health and wellness despite our health challenges. I'm so excited to be part of your self-development journey, just as so many of you have been part of mine. So let's do this. Let's share and grow together. Hello, my lovely listeners, and welcome to season 1 of my new podcast, We Share, We Grow. I am very excited to introduce my next guest, someone who has played a big part in my cancer recovery. She is a successful business owner who specifically helps women going through pregnancy and also fertility and hormonal issues through her services of acupuncture and reflexology in Kildare. We welcome this caring, generous soul, Miss Julie Foley. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, Aoife. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being here and giving up your time after a whole full days of work. I really appreciate it.
Not at all. I was just saying to my husband there earlier, it feels a little bit surreal to be getting glammed up after a day's work. So very nice. But look, delighted to be on. And as I said to you previously, I've never said yes to a podcast. So this is my first time saying yes, Aoife. So yes, hopefully this is the beginning of good things. Yes.
I
So
think
wishing you.
that's a test. That happened to me before.
Yeah.
I literally remembered the first time I was being tested to do a media thing, and I was like, I know I've no real reason to say no to this. And when I'm going to say yes to this, I just know a load of more stuff is going to keep coming. And I was like, do I take this jump?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's true. Like, once you say yes to one thing,
Yeah, and
it
we'll
all
enjoy it.
comes.
Anyway, it'll be a good
Absolutely.
chat. Yeah,
Absolutely. So I first met Julie when I was recovering from the cervical cancer. It was actually kind of early enough, after my treatment and everything. And Julie didn't have to, but she's so generous. She offered her services for free to me at the time because obviously a lot of people suffer financially when they're going through a cancer diagnosis and treatment. So that was really helpful and just so kind. There's so much kindness involved, I think, when one person becomes vulnerable and opens that door, so much kindness and support comes through. And Julie was definitely one of those people for me, because I also then, very shortly after going for my sessions with you, started my diploma in reflexology. So it was just like mad aligning timing. It was so good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I found you. But I don't really know your full story. All I know is that you did your training in China, which always was of interest to me for acupuncture, because obviously reflexology and acupuncture are forms of traditional Chinese medicine for anyone that doesn't know that. So yeah, I'd love if you could share a little bit of your story, Julie, on how you got to this point in your life.
Sure. So I suppose for me, I had always, always saw kids featuring in my life and met my husband and we hit it off and we were both working in the business world and pre reflexology and pre acupuncture, I would have worked in the telecoms industry and was in the industry for well over 15 years. So anyway, it came to that time then when it was time to try and have a family, and like that, everybody thinks, great, it's just going to happen, and you spend all of your 20s kind of going, oh my God, I can't fall pregnant, and or trying not to fall pregnant. And also for me, like I'm one of 9 kids,
Oh wow.
so yeah, so for assumption wise, I certainly would have thought, great, should be no problem at all falling pregnant. So yeah, so year one we were kind of trying, but we weren't trying, and kind of having the fun, and that was all
Yeah.
very exciting. And yeah, and it wasn't happening. And then year two came along, and at this stage we were kind of like, okay, for what's going on, maybe we need to get a little bit of advice here. And like that, I suppose in your, in the early days from a fertility perspective, there's there isn't a whole lot out there. Google is marvelous, but you also don't really know what it is that you're looking for. So for me, I went off to my GP and I had bloods, but I didn't know. I was quite naive. I didn't know what to get. And anyway, so I went to him, fabulous man, and he kind of said, "Look, Julie, I'll do some hormonal profiling." And he did that, and he rang me back and he said, "Look, at all your bloods are fine." So again, in the early stages, it's all very much, well, great. Well, what's fine? Well, he knows the answer, so everything is fine. And then Paul, my husband, he got checked out and he was super, and that was great. But we were still at the end of year 2, we weren't pregnant. So at this stage, then it was more kind of like, well, what do I do? Where do we go from here? Do we go down a certain route? Everything is fine, so why is it not happening? And I suppose this is where I kind of fell into this whole level of trying to find answers, so to speak, but yet I didn't really know what I was looking for, because I really didn't have a clue. So I got quite interested in the whole world of fertility. And I suppose also for me too, that I was at that stage within my circle of friends that everybody was falling pregnant, and like that, it's great, and you're so delighted when a friend comes up and says they're pregnant, but the butterflies go in your tummy, and you do get that kind of like, oh my God, it's great, but I wish it was me.
Yeah.
So that was really hard, and particularly when you're 3 years into it. Also for me, like, I was quite a private person, so I wouldn't really have shared a huge amount, like, with what, certainly, friends who had a lot to say, or friends who had a lot of advice, but they were the friends then that were falling pregnant easily. And I suppose too that when you are trying to fall pregnant, you notice everything. So I mean, like, I could walk into a room and I could say she's pregnant. I could, I like, it kind of actually got to a stage whereby the girls, when the announcements were coming for a Saturday night dinner, when the invitations were coming for the Saturday night dinner, I knew that there was going to be an announcement. So you strategically position yourself at the end of the table, and you go in and you're like, oh, and the paranoia sits in, and you're like, oh my God, they're all going to be looking at me because I'm not pregnant. And then it's like, hey, Aoife's pregnant, and you're, hey, but inside you're dying. And I think also that was a really, really tough time, because for me, when you do share a level, because fertility is vulnerability too, and when you do share that and people come up and say, well, is there anything happening? You're kind of like, well, I'm married now, how many years, and nothing is happening. And I've always shared with you that I'd love to have kids. That was tough. Also, when people would turn around and say, you just need to relax, you know, don't ever tell somebody who is trying to conceive to relax. Because if I got €1 for every single time that somebody told me to relax, I kid you not, I could build a house. So, that was tough. Also, I remember one friend at the time, certainly not a friend anymore, but I remember she turned around and she said, like, if you want to fall pregnant, you have to be happy. So like, people have amazing pieces of advice that they think is the right thing to say when it comes to the world of fertility. So that was the early but long phase of the world of fertility. And I remember saying to my husband, so we had gone and we had met doctors and we had met consultants. And of course, everybody at that time was, and it was, this was, I suppose, in the early stages where there wasn't too many fertility clinics. And I suppose that, it was, I remember one consultant saying to me, well, IVF is the last thing you want to do. And I remember walking out of there saying to my husband, oh my God, like, if he said that IVF is the last thing that you want to do, it must be awful. So, that always stuck with me. But anyway, I'm digressing there, because I suppose coming back then to, at the end of the 3 years, it was very much a case of, well, look, what do we do? Like, we've met with these consultants, we've gone to doctors, everybody's telling us that everything is fine, and these two words, unexplained infertility, and it just never sat well with me, because I always felt that it was there had to be something. I mean, we were both two very healthy individuals. I mean, like if you had told me to spin on my head 20 times and run up and down the garden and do whatever, I would have done it if it meant that I was going to fall pregnant. But I didn't know why I wasn't falling pregnant, and I didn't know what to be looking for in order to fall pregnant. So I was going off and I was meeting all these fabulous people, great, great doctors, great consultants, but I didn't have answers. And I suppose when you come from a business world, it's always like, well, what's the solution? There's a problem. What is the solution at the end? But God, that sounds so, ugh. But it's true. So we were going in and we were told, just do IVF. And I just kind of felt, well, it always stuck with me what that consultant had said, it's your last resort. So I just felt that IVF wasn't, it wasn't a fit. So I decided that I was going to go off and I was going to investigate, and I was going to see, what, for me, what I possibly could, and learn as much as I possibly could in relation to fertility. And I learned about bloods, and I learned about medications, and in all of this too, like, I suppose I had gone to the GP. I had gone through all the steps. I'd gone to the GP. Your bloods are fine. The next step then was to get them Paul checked, and he was checked and super duper. And then the next thing then was go off and get your tubes checked, and my tubes were fine. And then the next thing then was go and have a surgery to check and see if there was any endometriosis, and there was. And it was like this sequence of events that pretty much was just consistently happening, though when I first started out, nobody gave me this idea or this kind of scenario of what potentially could lay ahead for me in terms of what what reason it was for me not to fall pregnant. So anyway, I went and I met with a gynae, and this gynae kind of said, look, take this prescription, and this is going to help you fall pregnant. And I was like, okay. Again, I had gone off and I had researched, but I was ovulating. So I was given a drug at the time that was to help me ovulate, but yet I was ovulating. So when I came back, then I discovered anyway that it's to optimize your fertility. Look, I took the drug because, again, I was desperate to have a baby. But then and I took it for quite some time. So they normally would recommend that you take this medication for 3 to 6 months. And I just kept being handed a script for like 12 to 14 months, not longer. And I never once had a scan. And I learned a lot of this stuff after I had decided that, okay, enough is enough. I can't keep going back to this scenario of IVF. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm very much an advocate. IVF has its place, and it is amazing, for couples whereby there are fertility issues and they have come to the end of exploring XYZ, and then the last option then is IVF. But I just felt that IVF for us was not a fit. So anyway, I went off and I discovered lots of different things, and I learned about bloods, and I learned about nutrition, and I got headed off and I went and I saw a reflexologist and I did acupuncture, and I was just completely and utterly blown away. And I remember I came home. I remember one day, myself and my husband, and we were in a waiting room, and so we were going in because we were having a consult with this consultant. And there was a girl that was sitting in the waiting room, and she was hugely effusive, like herself and her husband. They were laughing and they were joking, and it was just lovely, because when you go into a waiting room in fertility clinic or in any sort of environment where fertility is involved, nobody looks at you. You walk in, it's head down, and it's very much a case of, oh my God, who am I going to see when I walk in there? Do I know anybody? Are they going to say to somebody else, what if I work with them, and whatever? So to see, this couple in there and laughing and whatever, it was lovely. So anyway, she was called in, and anyway, we'll call her Mary. So Mary went in anyway, and about 5 minutes later, Mary came out, and it was just tears. And I remember her just turning to her husband and just saying, I can't do this anymore. I
Oh,
just can't do this anymore. And I remember the whole waiting room was just like, oh my God. And I suppose, part of you is like, oh my God, that poor girl. And then the other side is like, oh my God, this could be us. This could
yes.
be us. And I remember after it, and I came out, and we had our meeting, and that was all fine and whatever, and very much exploratory. And I remember getting into the car, and I said to my husband, "Do you know what? If I ever fall pregnant, I am going to work in the area of fertility." And I remember
Wow.
I just made a commitment there and then.
Wow.
So I did fall pregnant eventually, and and that was just absolutely amazing, like just so amazing. And I did have some help, and but to say that it was, I mean, I cannot even begin to explain to you how it felt. Like I never did a test. I never ever did. In all of my fertility years, I could tell you now I did one test because you're, oh my God, I'm possibly pregnant, and you drive down and you get your pregnancy test, and you're driving home and you're like, oh my God, I'm having my period. All right, that's it. Or you get up to the bathroom, and then lo and behold, you walk into the bathroom, and you don't need to do a test because you've got your period. So there was so many months of that. And then when I found out I was pregnant, I had decided that I didn't want to do a pregnancy test. I had decided that I just wanted to get HCG bloods. And anyway, we got the bloods done, and I was in a meeting that morning, and I was doing a presentation, and I was on in 20 minutes. And my phone rang, and I was like, oh my God, I have to take this. And then I was like, oh my God, do I take it now? And then I'm going to be a blundering mess during the
Yeah.
meeting. Or what do I do? So I just said, oh no, flip it. I have to take it because Paul knew, obviously, that the clinic would be ringing me with results. And it wasn't IVF, by the way. I just decided to go and have a natural cycle and just have it monitored. And I had a trigger shot, and we had an IUI where they transfer the sperm directly into the womb,
Yes.
and which is, and we'll get to that. But anyway, I took the call, and it was like, "Hi, Julie," and I was like, oh, "Hi," and it was like, "Good news," and I was like, "Oh my God, really, really good news," and she was like, "You're pregnant," and I was like, "Oh my God." And then my boss then came downstairs, and he was like, "Julie, we're starting now in 5." And I was like, "Okay, 5, 5, 5. Yeah, I'll be there in 5, be there in 5." And I literally rang my husband, and I was like, "We're pregnant. We're pregnant." He's like, "Okay, right, I'll meet you for lunch." I said, "I can't meet you for lunch." And he was like, "What do you mean you can't meet me for lunch?" I said, "If I meet you for lunch, I'm going to come back to the office, and all I'm going to have is red eyes. I can't. I just can't do that."
Oh.
So anyway, it was fabulous. It was just absolutely fabulous. I went in, and do you know what? It just didn't matter. The meeting didn't matter because we got the news that, we got. And we were so delighted, and it was just absolutely great. And from that day on, I had said to myself, I am definitely going to work in the area of fertility. I'm going to share my experience, but more importantly, I think in the world of fertility, and look at it's constantly evolving, and as you know, Aoife, look at, I specialize primarily in fertility and pregnancy and hormonal issues, and I am a firm believer that you have to advocate. I mean, we could have been the couple that agreed to go down the route of IVF, and maybe it would have worked and maybe it wouldn't, but I just always had this thing in my head that the consultant said, well, IVF is your last port of call. And I was like, if we do that and that doesn't work, what are we going to do?
Hmm.
So yeah, so it was so that was really the beginning of it. And I suppose for me, so I went off and I trained, and I did my AMP, and then I did reflexology first, and then I went on and I did my acupuncture. And I suppose the majority of my client base from a fertility in when I'm working with fertility clients, it's probably recurrent miscarriage where there has been a loss. And that's really hard for women, like because there's so many different variables. And and I think also as well when it comes to the world of fertility, like it's not straightforward. Like it isn't just a case where, look at we've all been there. And I know certainly for yourself it's completely different circumstances because that's been taken from you. But like we spend a certain amount of our lives trying not to fall pregnant. And we then go into that, the part of our lives where it's all about, oh my God, I just can't wait to be a mother. And then when it doesn't happen, and yet it's happening for everybody else, and you're trying to keep your head above water and just remain sane and also just be yourself. It changes you. Like you can't just be yourself when something that you desperately want is not is not happening.
That's so
and
true. So true.
and,
And
and all,
it's interesting, like what you're saying about that really short space of time in the bigger like picture of the contrast of trying not to get pregnant for like so many years, like as a younger woman having sex and like being in younger relationships and then being dealt a completely different card when you
Mhm,
expect that it's going to happen straightforwardly. And yeah, no, that is a really good point. Because I kind of forgot that part of my
mhm,
feelings. There's so many
mhm,
feelings when you're going through it, so then you start to feel guilty for like taking the morning after pill or taking
mhm,
like the contraceptive pill. And some women of course have had abortions, like the guilt that comes then when you want it to happen and you feel
mhm.
like you've missed your moment, this is my punishment, the grief, the guilt, the shame, like there's just so much involved, really. It is so traumatic and life
Yeah,
shaping.
hmm and and I think also as well, then by the time then you actually get to that destination and you think, well, we're healthy, what bit? We're healthy, we're young, and then it just all changes. And somebody says do this and you do it, and somebody says do that. But I certainly would say, like for me, working in this industry, I like, do I say it industry? Like industry, it just seems so cold, but just working in this particular field, like it really has changed an awful lot. And so my daughter now is like she's coming on 18 now this year, like, and I've been involved in the area of fertility like pretty much like since before she was born, and certainly working with women like when she was 2, so like but it has changed. Like it has changed insofar that I remember for me it was the stats were something like 1 in 10, and I know like statistically and from a research they say that it is 1 in 10 or 1 in 7. Personally, I don't see that. I think it's more. Like when I meet women when they come into me, like they'll say, like, if it's a client who's working in a school, like, and they go into the staff room, like it's, there 4 or 5 colleagues. Out of the 4 or 5 colleagues, they will say there's 1 or 2. And
Wow.
then there's, then like when we look right across the board to like, it how many women are sharing that they're having fertility issues. So when we look at published information in terms of statistics and research, is it like realistically where are we basing that from? Like is it we need to be open with it. We need also to educate, and it needs to start from schools, that from like what are the sort of things that you would look for, like, so what are the sort of things that I would see in terms of how it would impact on your fertility. So things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, where the woman doesn't ovulate, a woman may not have a period. There's some clients that will come in, they might have a period once every 90 days. And that's where I suppose their therapies come in from their acupuncture, their
Mhm.
reflexology. But also, do they know, like, and I know certainly when I have met women, yeah, some of them will know that they do have PCOS, but some women don't know. And they think, well, I've always had this, so this is normal. Or for the woman that might have painful periods, and she accepts that, well, that's normal. And then
Yeah,
she
it's
might go,
scary what people accept as their norm, as like a baseline level of health, when you're like, no, like you can't go around being chronically fatigued or chronically in
yeah.
pain, or like
Mhm,
with your period or other health conditions.
mhm,
And definitely I can imagine so many people don't know about these ailments that they might have. But in my experience, like mid to late 20s, which is when I was going through my oncology slash fertility issues, because I had a radical hysterectomy as part of my cancer treatment. For our listeners, I was actually obviously talking and advocating about my situation, and women that were the same age as me coming back to me were afraid of this unknown, what's going on inside me, that were going through situations of what you're kind of describing, like not having periods for a long time, or knowing something is probably happening, but really afraid to find out what is happening, because maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's a culture thing, or maybe it's just a personal internal thing. Do you come across that at all, or would you have any advice for people like that are just stuck and afraid to find out what's going on? But then, time is so precious in these situations too.
Yeah, well, time is precious, but then I would also say that, a woman's intuition, it's generally right. Go with your gut. Like if you feel that something is not right, well then go and do something about it. It's a bit like, the woman, but it's the advocating. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So like you might go to your GP, or you might go to, well, it's predominantly, I suppose, your healthcare practitioner, and you might go to them and you might say, I've painful periods. So depending on who you're going to,
Mm,
they might say, well, it's normal. Well, what's normal? Who said painful periods was normal? So it isn't normal. A woman should not have pain when she has her periods. So if she goes to a healthcare practitioner and they say it's normal, well, then she's going to take that and say, well, he said it was normal. She said it was normal. So then it must be normal. So I think, that if something doesn't feel right, well then it isn't right.
true.
So, and if you feel that something isn't quite right from your health, go and get it investigated. And and I think too, certainly, and that's right across the board. That's not just for fertility.
Yeah.
That's in every, like if you're getting persistent headaches, and you being somebody that never had headaches, and then all of a sudden you're getting a daily headache. Well, okay, this is abnormal. This is not something you've ever had. Go and get it investigated. Go to the expert. But I do think that certainly in Ireland, when it comes to the world of fertility, it's all very much fertility clinic based. And there is this, GPs are fantastic and they can only work within their realm. And I think it is very fair to say that there are so many GPs out there, like, that they are completely and utterly, their backs against the wall, like you've had COVID, you've had GPs that are dealing with XYZ, and then they're expected to know everything. And then if it's not their area of expertise, and this is what's really hard. So a GP is doing the right thing by saying, well, look, I'm going to refer you on to such and such. And then, before you know it, you're doing IVF. So, and you may not necessarily do IVF, or like, where is our in between in terms of investigation? We're, and also it's to educate, and it has to start, from a secondary school level, to educate that, look, if something is not right from your um, menstrual health, will investigate it. Like the majority of women say that I would meet, like they'll come in and they'll say, well, I was on the pill for 10 years, so I had nothing to worry about. And then they come in, the periods are irregular, they put it down to the pill, and then something becomes evident that maybe it is PCOS, or they come in and, they have been on the pill, and then endometriosis occurs, or adenomyosis, and then they go into their GP, and the GP saying, well, look, I'm going to send you to such and such. And then they say, no, 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 we're not going to do anything, but go to a fertility clinic. Like, you would be amazed at the amount of couples that have gone through so many rounds of IVF that have failed. And then to find out that actually there was an issue of XYZ that could have been treated that may have prevented them from going down the route of IVF.
Oh, wow.
Not everybody, but not, again, I go back to IVF is fabulous, and it is, it plays its part, but we do have to look at the investigations. We do have to look at, where is a woman's fertility health, by the time she decides that she wants to have a baby. And and then falling into these, when you must be under 30, and then if you're not pregnant within 6 months, and then you must be under 35 and you're not pregnant within 12 to 18 months, but then you get it investigated. But like, it's not, ultimately, we shouldn't be working off a script. I mean, it's, when I meet clients, it's very much, well, how many kids do you want to have? When I'm 39, if I have one, I'd be happy. So we have to, we definitely have to, I suppose, create a little bit more awareness for the woman to advocate. But also, in order to advocate, we have to make them aware that this is what this is where you should be when it comes to fertility health. And yeah, and it is, look, it is, and it, look, it's a long road. It's a very, very long road, and it's great because Ireland really has evolved over the last 15 years. And look, we have more fertility clinics in Ireland, which, certainly going back, I think, gosh, I think I knew of two or three. But what's really, really difficult for couples in Ireland is that in order for a couple to access any sort of services, when it comes down to fertility, they have to pay for it. And that's not okay. Like, so you look at the NHS, and you are, if you fall within, you're not falling pregnant, but then you are entitled to XYZ. Okay, you may have to, stick to the script in terms of, it may not necessarily be, the protocol may not necessarily be for everybody, but there's services available to them. Whereas here, couples have to come up with a lot of money. I mean, I have met couples over the years. I've met a couple where they have spent over 200,000 euro on fertility treatment, and they didn't have a baby at the end of it. And
Wow.
yeah, it is hugely, hugely expensive. It's private. It's not regulated. Like, we definitely need to do something for couples. Okay, I'm not that person, but certainly we have to start looking after couples when it comes to the world of fertility. And that is right across the board. That's not, that's for same-sex couples.
Yeah.
That's for, it's for everybody, like, so like yourself, Aoife, like, so you were an oncology client. So, okay, you get the option then of having a freeze all. I don't know, did you? But it is an option there.
Yeah.
So something has to be detrimental
Yeah.
in order for you to freeze your eggs. But is it not detrimental for a couple who are trying to desperately have a baby, and it's not happening? So then they're told, well, okay, off you go, and gather up 5,000 euro. So 5,000 euro is a hell of a lot of money. And then if it doesn't work, or what if there's no embryos? And then they have to do it all over again. It's really, really difficult. And it's not okay.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I suppose, like a Western approach to medicine and healthcare in general. Like, we do look for a quick fix, and we don't always explore those other little steps or options that can be taken, like what you're speaking about. And I suppose that is like where the reflexology and acupuncture comes in. Um,
Mhm.
I obviously am a huge advocate and love it. Even before I studied reflexology, I actually found it helpful, as the Cancer Society of Ireland offered it for free for
Yeah.
cancer patients, and I mean, that speaks volumes in itself.
Mhm.
So how can those reflexology and acupuncture kind of, how do they assist with women's health issues from your experience?
So, okay, so like, if we're looking at in terms of the whole body, so if a woman is not ovulating, then obviously from an endocrine perspective, hormones are completely out of balance. So for both therapies, for reflexology and for acupuncture, so we rebalance, so we're resetting. So, and then in terms of other things then that come into play, so say if a woman comes in and she has endometriosis, so from a reflexology perspective, we will be doing a lot of adrenal work to reduce the level of inflammation. We do a lot of lymphatics, and then from acupuncture, it's a very specific set of patterns that fall into place when it comes to acupuncture. So probably acupuncture, we are from a diagnostic perspective. So when a client comes in, we would look at their tongue, we would take their pulses, we get their history, exactly the same as from a reflexology, we get their full history. We look at what their menstrual health is like. So, if there's very painful periods, yes, it helps with painful periods. Certainly from if the periods are irregular, it helps to regulate periods. If a couple is going through IVF, then certainly from an acupuncture perspective, like we would do treatments in terms of assisting with if there's thin lining, we're picking up lining. We would use electroacupuncture then if they're not responding to medication. If there is, we also do this pre and post protocol then when it comes to embryo transfer. There's so many different things that the reflexology and acupuncture helps with. It is amazing, like amazing. And I suppose even myself, like when I first started, like it wasn't that I was a skeptic, but I'd only known medicine. I didn't know, so it was just that I kind of said, okay, well, there has to be something more. I don't necessarily need to be taking all of these hormones. My body is ovulating. So what can I do to enhance? And I firmly, firmly believe that my therapies definitely helped me from a pregnancy perspective in terms of falling pregnant, just keeping me, like it's the homeostasis which we all learn,
Yes.
when it comes to holistic therapy. So, it's homeostasis is a sense of balance, but we all feel it. When we're balanced, we're good. When we're off
Yes.
balance, we know, so
So
you've
true.
you've had a tough day, you're stressed, okay, you're off balance, you might go into the kitchen, oh my God, I don't know what I want to eat today, but you have a nice steady day, you might start your day with meditation, you've had a nice day, and you go into the kitchen, what am I going to have? Oh yeah, I'd love to have whatever, but nothing is an issue because it's balancing. And I think in today's world as well, it's very different for it's very different in the world of fertility. So I suppose our moms, as I said, like I'm one of 9. Did I ever think that I was going to have an issue in the area of fertility? Not in a million years. But did you ever think, Aoife, that you were going to be the person that would go through a cancer diagnosis and then end up in early menopause? Not in a million years. And
Yeah.
then you look at your mum, and your mum had no issue falling pregnant. My mum had no, they were all traveling up north to get condoms and the pill
Yeah.
because
Love letters or something. French letters or something they
exactly,
used to call them, was it?
exactly.
Yeah.
But life was different then. And I know certainly clients come into me and they say, Julie, like, is is stress playing a part in what, in me not falling pregnant? Like stress adds to everything, so, I'm a firm believer. Some stress every day is fine, but not lots of stress all day, every day.
Hmm.
But is stress ultimately, it comes back to this relax, relax. But basically, what we're trying to do there is cortisol is your stress hormone. And we know that cortisol, when it's quite high, is going to reduce the level of progesterone, which is your ovulating hormone. So if we can try and get some balance, well,
Hmm.
then we're only doing good. But then there's a little bit more to it when it comes to fertility, because there can be different things. It can be a sperm, it can be a male fertility factor issue. It can be, a woman might have an underlying infection. It can be endometritis, it can be endometriosis, it can be adenomyosis, it can be PCOS, it can be reproductive immunology, particularly when it comes to recurrent miscarriage, which is a huge area. And, that basically is where the body sees the potential pregnancy as being a foreign object, so it attacks it.
Yes, it rejects it. Yeah.
So yeah, so like it has evolved, but so we have evolved. We are much more busier than our moms would have been. Life is busier, like it's just trying to keep a lid on it all. And I think certainly when COVID came along, even as a practitioner and certainly as a mom and as a wife, I mean, I think a lot of people took stock in relation to that. And Uh, and I definitely think that there was a lot of good things that came out of COVID. A lot of good things that came out of it. There's also a lot of awful things that came out of it too, because a lot of couples, their treatments were delayed, in clinics, and couples who were ready to have an egg collection that didn't have it because the country was shut down, fertility clinics were shut down. There was little things like that. Couples who went through pregnancies and the husband wasn't allowed in for a scan. Like, where I I understand to a certain degree pandemics and cross infection, all of that, but how on earth can you say to a woman, particularly, like, babies are so precious, and when a fertility couple have got the two lines, or they've got the bloods back to say that they have fallen pregnant, what a precious pregnancy. But a lot of it is very short-lived joy. And the joy comes on the day that the test is positive, and then it's like, oh my God, particularly when there's recurrent miscarriage, or particularly when there has been a lot of failed cycles, or, so it's like, oh my God, it's great. Oh my God, we have to get to the first scan. Then they get to the first scan, which is at 7 weeks, and then it's like, oh my God, we need to get to the next scan. The next scan could be 2 weeks later. Then they have to get to 12 weeks. And then they get to 12 weeks and they don't want to tell anybody because we don't want to tempt fate. And then, and during all of that, a lot of clients will be on a lot of medication. It could be on progesterone, could be on aspirin, thinner, you name it. They could be on a multitude of drugs. And then they don't want to tell anybody because they have to come off these medications. And then they want to get to the anatomy scan, or the big scan.
Yeah.
And it's 20 weeks. And it's just, a lot of these pregnancies are really, really tinged with huge levels of anxiety. And then we had COVID. And then COVID said, you ain't coming in, mister. You can't come in and you can't accompany your wife or your partner and see how your baby's doing. And yet your wife has a history of recurrent loss. So for every time that she walked through those doors, it was a very high probability, like a lot of clients have said, they were near enough to having a panic attack. The knees nearly buckling from under them, hopping up onto the plinth. Please let it be good news. And when it was bad news, the husband is sitting outside. And then I remember one client saying to me, she was in for over an hour. So her husband was outside thinking, oh my God, it's all gone wrong. And ringing her. And, like, it was like COVID did a lot of damage in relation to that, most definitely. And then it also did a lot of good. And I think certainly from a practitioner perspective, and certainly as a family, I think a lot of people certainly took a lot of stock in terms of what's important. Do we need to be doing crazy hours? Do we need to be flying all over the place, going here, there, and whatever? That's my answer to that anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It has been an insane trip and journey for so many different people. I've heard so many different types of stories, like not just individual stories, like types of stories. Like what you're saying, we see people like come full circle and make the most out of a really difficult situation. And then other people just really fell down that were like already probably not doing so okay. Really, it was like the final straw. Certainly for me, like I literally finished my radiotherapy. I think it was like 2 weeks and then lockdown. So
Yeah.
I had to, like, I suppose then everything that happened had to be processed. So it was all processed at once on top of this respiratory virus that was going around killing people. I had a respiratory disease, so that added anxiety plus cocooning. I know, like, I was one of millions, because when I started talking about all the things I was trying to process and deal with, people were reaching out to me saying the same thing, like people going through oncology treatment, fertility treatment. Surrogacy was another one, which was really hard because of the travel restrictions. It was just incredible to really learn. And I do think like COVID has made a lot of us a little bit more empathetic and just self-aware, but also aware of what's going on out there for other people, and to try and be, I suppose, a little bit kinder. That's all we can kind of do. And yeah, just it's amazing the stories that people have and the resilience that comes through it. And I think that's kind of been a little bit of a push for this podcast too, because I've really learned, even as a reflexologist, people open up and share their really their huge challenges with me, and I'm so appreciative of that, and I think it's important to share those lessons to keep us all, I suppose, grounded and grateful. If you, so obviously you are dealing with something so precious with your clients, something so tender and vulnerable. It must be difficult for you as a practitioner too, though, to be dealing with such highs, and then such lows for clients. Is there any kind of
Yeah,
advice like for protecting your own energy mentally and physically?
I think certainly in the early days starting out, you can't be all to everybody. You are the practitioner and they are coming to you and it's for 1 hour, and sometimes clients will come and say, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, we wouldn't be here without you. But you know what? My response always to that is, well, 1 hour of whatever, a week, of 2 weeks, of a month, of 2 months, it's what they decide to do at the end of it all. So that's, on a client level, but certainly on a practitioner level, you cannot be all to everybody. And you do need to have things in place that are your downtime. I mean, I would say to my clients, look at what's your downtime? What do you do to de-stress? You'd be
Mm-hmm.
amazed at the amount of people that actually say, oh my God, I never thought about that. So for me, what do I do for me? I'm very much, I love being outdoors. I love walking. Really, like that's my thing. Like even after this, Aoife, I'm out of here. I'm going for a nice long walk, and that's my decompression. I also talk to other colleagues as well. So I have a band, and it's nearly like one thing that we don't have in our, I suppose, cohort from a reflexology and acupuncture, we don't have supervision. But it's really important. Get yourself a buddy. Get yourself somebody that you can bounce things off, because particularly in the early days, self-doubt creeps in. And I remember, yeah, try, kind of, oh, do I try and make the plunge? Do I jump? Do I leave business now and do I just go into this? Like when, and I remember a friend just said, you just need to do it. You just need to do it. And I was always really, really adamant that I was never, ever, ever going to do anything. I was never going to work in skeletal. I was never going to work in muscular. I was always going to do fertility, pregnancy, women's health only. And I always stuck to my guns in relation to that. And then I bounce off other colleagues and I keep reading, because it does change and it's constantly evolving, and you have to stay current, like you have to stay up to date. And that, interestingly enough, it's a decompression for me. I actually really do enjoy, and I'm not saying that because I work in the area, but I really do enjoy learning about new things that are coming on board. But in terms of the de-stressors, yeah, being in good company, going out for dinner, but certainly from a burnout perspective, you have to set your boundaries. And again, going back to the early days, like self-doubt creeps in. You might have a client that will come into you and they kind of say, I never forget the first time when I needed a client and she had a bruise and she sent me the picture and I was like, oh my God, now I wouldn't mind. I had seen this in college. Like my
So
toes.
common, yeah.
So
I
common.
bruise
And I was
all
like,
the time from acupuncture. Well, I just
and I was
bruise all the time though.
I know, but you're like, oh my God, oh my God. And then you're like, okay, it's normal. Or if a client might text you and kind of said, I'm feeling really, really tired. I know you said I'd feel tired after it. And you're like, oh God, did I overdo it on treatment? No, you didn't. It's just every individual is different.
Yeah.
And also, if you really enjoy what you do, it's going to come through. You don't need, like, clients are amazing. Like, and I've often said this, like, this is so cheesy, but it's so true. Like, I really do believe that it is an honor to work with people when they come in and they bare their souls,
Yes.
because it's such a deep rooted thing, like a trauma. There's a lot of trauma when it comes to the world of fertility. There's a lot of trauma that comes with a lot of deliveries. There's a lot of trauma that
Mm.
comes going through pregnancy. There's a lot of trauma that comes as a result of going into early menopause. There's a lot of trauma that goes for women going through perimenopause, going through menopause. They don't even realize the half of it until they come out the other side and they kind of go, oh my God, I spent the last 10 years in perimenopause and I didn't even know. You know, mm-hmm. So it's so so there is that sense of vulnerability, and as a practitioner, we have to remind ourselves that the days that there are the self-doubt, and you close the door and you kind of go, wow, they shared a lot with me. That's an honor, so, and they trust you, they're trusting you with their stories, and everybody has a story to tell, and you always, and look at, I know in terms of, there are the highs and there are the lows. There are great highs. There's absolutely amazing highs. And I cannot, it's just fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And I think, when you've gone through a fertility journey and and you've experienced what that high is, you really get it. Like, and I'm not taken away from any other practitioner, but it's just, I just can't describe it. It's really like you've got the news yourself. And then there's
Oh,
lows, and then
wow.
there's really tough days. And there's days when you close the door and you kind of go, oh my God, like, did that seriously? Why do they have to go through that? Or why did somebody get to where they got to and the joy is taken? To have joy for such a limited period of time, and then it's just the rug is pulled from under you. And that's where your buddies come in, and that's where your other practitioners come in, and that's where you have to set boundaries, and that's where you have to be, I work these hours, and because you are a mirror to your clients at the end of the day. So you can't be burnt out. If you're burnt out, you're no good to your clients. And I think every practitioner, we've all gone through it. We've all had burnout. And anybody that hasn't, and I don't believe them for 1 minute, because I think you do get to a stage where you do kind of go, okay, whoa, something has to give here. So, just set your boundaries, and also have a practice in place. Like, I get up in the morning and I would do a meditation. If I don't do meditation, I'll go for a walk. I don't go for a walk, I go for a cycle, or I might do a workout. But I always, at the end of the day, I'll always do something, because I can't come straight from work straight into, I have to, and even if it's just 10 minutes, even if it's or driving home in the car, or just listening to a podcast, or I adore podcasts. I absolutely adore podcasts.
Glad to hear
And
that much.
there you go. And that's what I was saying to, like, it's just great because they're anywhere.
They are.
So it's having the downtime, but also recognizing when there is some burnout. And have frequent holidays, like, you don't have to go away.
Yes. Just
Take
change your
time out.
environment.
Yeah,
You get
yeah,
a lot
completely.
more intuitive when you're out of your ordinary environment, and you
Yeah,
literally have no choice but to be, you slow down mentally and physically, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
there's a lot of telling signs that become a little bit louder. And I always say that, like, your body literally tells you what to do. If we could just slow down and listen to it, we'd probably be a lot
Completely,
healthier than we are. I
completely.
definitely I haven't gone for acupuncture or reflex. I obviously do a little bit of reflexology to myself, but
Mhm.
I haven't gone for acupuncture now. Like, in a month, my acupuncturist here in Wexford is gone off to get married, and I
Good for
cannot.
her.
Yeah, good for her. Go on, Paula. um, but
Yay.
my hot flushes, oh my god, they're gone through the roof lately. Which is so annoying because they had really slowed down with the acupuncture. The weather has not helped. It's been sweaty,
No,
it's been hot, it's been clammy. And they come with this little rush of anxiety too. I wonder, is that common for women? But, like, I literally get these, like, butterflies and this heat head to toe. Hair
yeah,
gets
that's,
tied up,
yeah,
shoes and socks come off. Oh my god, it's
mhm.
horrendous.
Yeah,
Um
it is.
it's really, really hard, especially
Mhm.
if you're out in public or anything. I work from home, so
Yeah.
it's fine. But do
Mhm.
you have any kind of advice for menopausal clients? Because I would have a menopausal following on here.
Yeah, I definitely would say, from a menopausal perspective, like, you know, certainly the whole perimenopause side of things, like, and I think certainly, I think the whole Joe Duffy, that show last year certainly did open up a huge, that was just amazing for women, and also to recognize that, look, at if you're going from, you're, fairly calm, and then all of a sudden, we'll experience it. The periods will change. They might become heavier, they might become lighter, the mood might drop, particularly coming into, the second phase of your cycle. The sleep might become off, and sometimes as women, we might say, oh, I was so busy. I was overtired, like I was doing so much or had stress, and they accept that that is just part of living on a day-to-day basis, and that's life. But actually, when you look back from a perimenopausal perspective, a lot of it is down to perimenopause. And then when you're in the throes of menopause, it's so obvious. And yes, just fabulous. There are some women that will breeze through it, but the hot flush from head to toe, I mean, that's really tough. And particularly in warm weather. And it's wonderful that we're having conversations about warm weather in Ireland, because it's not something we talk about an awful lot. But certainly the head to toe side of things, cold drinks, just make sure. And I think also as well, look at, it's just to be, if you're in company when you have a hot flush. I was talking to a lady there recently, and she has just recently retired, and she was in a fairly senior job, and she was saying to me, I said, so how are you, like kind of post retirement? And she was like, I had to get out. And she had worked in a very, very male domineering industry. And she said, like, I would be in meetings and I literally would have to say, lads, I'm having a flush, give me a few minutes. And she said once she made it known, it was fantastic, where she
Right.
said before they were all looking down at the floor, she had the beads of sweat hanging off her face and whatever. So look at that, that's one side of it. But then in terms of from a looking after yourself, and that is, go and see a therapist, reflexology, acupuncture, herbs, all of this stuff. Like, it's only when you're doing it that you realize it. And it's a little bit like, look, you have to do it to feel it. So, and if you're feeling so awful as a result of menopause or perimenopause, if your sleep is compromised, your reflexology and your acupuncture is going to help. If you are having hot flushes, both is going to help with it. If you're having, if you're sweating, if you have anxiety, if the mood is dropping, like and women, I think we are great because we want to find answers. And again, it does come back to, like, we don't have enough specialists in Ireland when it comes to menopause. Like, I don't know if you've watched the whole Deirdre Lundy. I mean, Dr. Deirdre, she is amazing. But we need hundreds of Deirdre Lundys, and again, it comes back to the GP. Like, she's trying to get as many GPs trained up in the area of menopausal services as she possibly can, but it's tough. It's really, really tough. So I would say explore, definitely look at having your therapies, and go to somebody that does specialize in the area of women's health. And there's loads of us out there, absolutely loads of us out there. And also from a diet perspective, look at your diet. Like, we would say in Chinese medicine, if there's loads of heat in the body, you don't really want to be having lots of chilies and lots of hot foods. You want cool, nourishing foods. But obviously your acupuncturist will go through that. Herbs are fantastic. Reflexology, fantastic. Go to a nutritionist. Go to a nutritionist that specializes in menopause. All of these things are absolutely fantastic. There are some amazing supplements on the market at the moment, specifically for menopause. And seriously, like, clients have come in and have said it is the difference between them feeling fantastic and feeling awful. So, and look, it can be really tough for some women trying to get through the day with menopause. It's not, look, Aoife, you are the byproduct of somebody that was flung. You didn't even have the 10 years of perimenopause.
No.
You had gone through a trauma, and then you were thrown into another trauma, and you were thrown into 150% of a menopause. And it's kind of like, well, do you know what, just get on with it. And again, HRT plays its part. And then there are some women that will come in and they'll say, look, I don't really want to go down the route of HRT, and this is where our therapies come into play. And then if things are not going the way that, they're not getting as much relief, they may need to have more treatment, or they may need to look at other avenues then as well. But there's plenty out there, plenty. But again, it comes back to just making sure that you're going to the right person, and that you're heard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really great advice. Are other therapists easy to find? Is it like literally through Google that we could find like therapists
So
that specialize in women's health? Or
So I'm part of a group called the Acupuncture for Fertility and Pregnancy Ireland. So we all specialise in women's health. So www.afpi.ie. So everybody in that group is specifically trained in women's health. And look, that's really what, like, and look, you'll see it on a website. Like if you go onto anybody's website, you will see it's women's health. Like what do they specialize in? And if they don't have it, but say a friend has gone to them, just get them to ring. I have, do you specialize? Like it is important that it's a little bit like the counselor. You're not going to go to a counselor for, grief if they, I'm no, sorry, I really can't comment on that, but do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you
yeah,
go to somebody that they don't necessarily, you're not going to go to a cardiologist to fix your leg,
exactly.
so,
Exactly.
so it's just, it is, so just do a little bit of research, ask a girlfriend, you know, what have you done? How have you got through the
Mm.
menopause? What did you do? Like women were great for talking.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
great for
one thing
talking.
we definitely are good at. But I suppose it's opening that door to the conversation, because there's definitely a shift happening, but there's still a lot to be done. And I
We
definitely
have the
agree with you with
menopause hubs there as
yes,
well. That's the that's the doctors
yes.
specifically trained in the area of menopause. So yeah, so that, look, we're definitely getting there. We are getting there.
Absolutely, we're definitely getting there.
Mm.
And if anyone is looking for your own services in the Kildare area, have you your own website?
So
Or
I have, my website is Positive Health Ireland. See that, Positive Health, advocate
beautiful,
for yourself. That came from, so positivehealthireland.ie. That's me.
gorgeous. Thank you so
Mm.
much for that, Julie. We'll just go through our little rapid fire round before we finish up.
Mm-hmm.
So first question is, what are your top pieces of advice on wellness or health that you would recommend to others?
Top piece of advice is trust your gut, advocate for yourself. If you think that something's not right and someone keeps saying to you, no, 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 persist, persist, because 9 times out of 10, you're right. And having worked in this industry for such a long time, like, and women have come in and they've said, I just always had this feeling that something wasn't right. And then when they got to it, then they'll come in and they'll say, I knew it. So
That's
trust
so
your gut,
true. That's so true. I
trust
knew
your
I
gut.
had issues with my sexual health and my reproductive system. And
Really?
I had a gynecologist, and I said I had just got the coil in, and I said, this is supposed to make a lot for most women periods easier. I said I'm in crippling pain. I feel like I'm getting contractions. I'm sweating. I'm close to fainting. We said just give it another few months. Got my smear test done in Ireland and everything before I went off to Australia, and that was all clear. And then, but like the whole time I had cervical cancer, it just was so high up
Yeah.
in the canal. But the tumor was, or the tumor and the coil were like obviously not friends, and that I think the coil like disturbed everything and set the
Yeah.
alarm
But
off.
you
But
knew, your gut told you that something wasn't right.
my gut told me, my body bloody told me to.
Mm.
Thankfully.
Mm.
Okay. What in life brings you the most joy?
Joy. Okay. Joy from a Julie perspective. I love nothing more than going out with my family, with my two kids and my husband, and having dinner. And I love the catch up. I love the chat, where's everybody at? The kids will tell you a few stories, what's going on. And, you might have them in the kitchen, but you'll get a little bit more out of them when we're out and about. I love that. And I love being out. I just love going out for dinner and having the chats. And just being around family. And I love being outdoor. I love going out for a walk. It's my therapy. That brings me so much joy.
Mm,
And in my working life, the joy, there is nothing nicer than a client coming in. So from a fertility client, for them to say that they got good news and the scan has gone well, and and you see them then throughout. And for my pregnancy clients, that everything that they wanted from a delivery has all worked out. And then for the menopause or hormonal women, that they're feeling good. That's that's great.
it's
That's
incredible.
lovely. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
that's
so
really,
like rare and special, and to be part of that for someone else is just huge, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
humbling.
lovely. Hmm.
Last one. Do you have a favorite quote or affirmation?
Trust your gut.
Ah, yes, of course. And also, you won't tell people to relax. I saw that on the website. She was literally like
Oh,
one
wait,
sentence. I won't tell you to relax.
no, and like it is like, look at, and look at it comes from a good place, but just sometimes in the world of fertility, people don't necessarily need to hear advice.
Yeah.
People just need you to not say anything
And
and
listen.
just acknowledge the fact that they're in a relationship for 5 to 6 years. They've always talked about it in the past that they would love to have no kids. They don't have kids. Respect it. Don't ask questions. And like,
I know. I know.
yeah.
People mean
So
well most of the time. It's just when
absolutely.
you're so
So
sensitive and grieving, it's hard.
yeah,
Things
yeah,
hit
and
hard.
also believe. Like, you have to believe. You have to believe that something is, like, just keep believing. Hold on to the belief that you will eventually get to where you want to get.
Julie, this has been my
Okay.
favorite chat so
Oh,
far.
I bet you say that to all your
I
families.
swear this has been fantastic. But you have so much knowledge and passion, and I can really hear how much you love your job and you love helping your clients. And I think I'll have to just have you back on to pick your brain about more topics, because you're just like, you've so much knowledge and wisdom, and I've just really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being part of the
Thank
podcast.
you for the opportunity, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And my first ever Aoife.
Woo! Well,
Yeah.
more to come, definitely from me too. Thank you so much, guys, and thanks for
Okay.
listening.
Okay. Thanks, Aoife.
I hope you found this week's episode as awe-inspiring as I did. As I always say, knowledge is power, and I know you've gained an abundance of both from this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can watch these episodes over on my YouTube channel, Breathe with Aoife. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to We Share, We Grow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really enjoyed this episode, please donate over on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Breathe with Aoife, to help me gain the means to share and grow even more with you all. Thanks for listening.